After a few years from being away from the title, the Detroit Lions again have one of the best and most important units in football.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, where you get the best analysis of the National Football League anywhere, anytime. Stepping in for Brian Peacock, I am Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media. Joined, as always, by the one, the only former NFL scout Matt Williamson at Williamson NFL. Today, we're going to be breaking down the entire league and their offensive lines, who's the best, who's the worst, the heavy work that has been done for some big-time franchises like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the big-time turnover for Baker Mayfield. No, not those turnovers. Turnover on the offensive line. We're going to get to all of that on today's episode of Peacock and Williamson. We appreciate you very much for being here and making us your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Matt, we're going to dive right in here, taking a look at where I believe we're going to be talking about the best of the best. Let's start in the NFC North. We're going to go division by division, and we're grading above average, average, and below average on these. But I think we got the best of the best in the NFC North. Am I right?
I 100% agree. And really, if we did this the last 3 or 4 years, the Eagles would have been the number one team. But I think it's now the Lions. Kelsey retired, a little bit of age in Philadelphia, where Detroit's really coming into their own. I mean, Ragnow might be the best center in the league. If I had any offensive lineman to build my line around, it would be Penei Sewell. They just paid him accordingly. The guards are solid. You know, I mean, they drafted a couple guys, too, to keep replenishing it. So I think the strength of the Lions is the best offensive line in the league.
It very much easily is the best offensive line of the league. And that's so great, too, for a surging team. Like, if you're going to be a surging team, having the best offensive line and being able to win in the trenches, that's what creates longevity for a team that has gone through the trials and tribulations that the Detroit Lions have.
No doubt. And there's a saying in the league that good offensive lines travel. And what they mean by that is, if you have a really strong offensive line, your offense should have a very high floor. You know, if you're playing in bad weather, you're playing in a dome, you're playing in Buffalo in the AFC championship game, you should be able to hold your own on the road, adverse conditions, on the backbone of a great line.
Yeah. Bite kneecaps, as somebody would say. So let's do like Amon-Ra St. Brown in Receiver, the new Netflix series, and do a little bit of a Lambeau leap from the Detroit Lions to
I watched it last night. It was pretty good.
Oh, it was so good. It was awesome. I love the personalities of these guys too, with families. Everybody's great. We might have to. We'll have to come back and talk a little bit about Receiver.
A friend of mine actually is in charge of it with NFL Films. I went to high school with a guy named Keith Codrow.
That's awesome.
So he's like the first one on the credits. So does great stuff.
See,
very cool.
See,
I should get him on the podcast. Actually, right?
Yeah, let's do it. That would be so good. That would be. I'll kick Brian off for that episode too. He's not coming back for that one. I'm coming back for that one. All right, so let's Lambeau leap over to the Green Bay Packers. Above average, average, below average. What do you see for Jordan Love's unit?
Yeah, and I wanted to do these 3 categories. We don't need to fight. Is they the 9th best line or the 11th best line? You know, I mean, are they an asset? Are they middle of the road, or are they a strength? First round pick on the line. You know, I think that's helpful for them. But I always look at Green Bay and think they're a really well coached group. That the sum of their parts. What's that saying? That the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. You know, they play really well together. You don't see weaknesses. So I'm going to call them average, but on the higher end of average.
Sure. Yeah. Does the loss of David Bakhtiari pull them back a little bit?
I think they've been dealing with that well enough over the last couple of years. The writing's kind of been on the wall, and they're so good at manufacturing 4th round picks into starters. I mean, they've mined offensive line talent and develop it really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at the Minnesota Vikings next. What do you have for them?
I'm going to keep them at average. If we were to just do tackles, they would be way above average. If we were just to
Yeah, for
do
sure.
interior, they'd be way below average. So you'd rather be stronger at tackle than them up the middle, but I think they have to be average. I love their pair of tackles. Their inside worries me a little bit.
Do you have a quick explainer for the audience about why being stronger at tackle is more important than being like you'd rather be stronger at tackle than on the interior?
Just because they're harder to find. I mean, there's just
Mm,
less humans walking the earth that are 6'6" as opposed to 6'3". I mean, there's a shortage of them. There's a lot of teams playing with replacement level tackles. So there's just a supply and demand thing more than anything.
yeah, yeah. That's
But
a good context too for NFL draft, why those guys go early as
of
opposed to the
course,
interior guys.
and this year's class was amazing. We're going to talk about a lot of first round linemen, a lot of first round tackles. Although there is a trend, and we'll really get to this when we talked about the Rams, guards
Mhm.
and centers were really paid well this offseason in free agency
Yeah,
too.
that's true.
I
That's
mean,
true. Yeah.
it's balancing out a little bit more.
All right, let's take a look at the Chicago Bears. There's a lot of excitement, but is any of that excitement in the trenches for them?
Yeah, I like them. I mean, I like their first round pick last year, right? I think he has a chance to be a star, but I'm going to also go with average here as well. So this is a pretty good division. You're 3 average and the
Yeah,
best
pretty
ones in
solid.
there. I mean, it's pretty solid. Yeah.
Yeah, not a bad place to be. All right, let's jump over to the NFC East, where the reigning best offensive line used to be, but maybe where the current worst offensive line might be. What do you think about those Washington Commanders?
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to get really in the weeds about individual players. I like Sam Cosmi. He's a talented young
Hmm.
player, but the rest of their line to me screams replacement level, below level starters. And, Rome wasn't built in a day. I mean,
Sure.
Washington finally got rid of the owner. They're making wholesale changes, but I bet next offseason will be heavy on the O-line. I think they're 32nd if I had to do a list right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Washington Commanders sitting at the bottom. Not a great place to be when you have a rookie quarterback, but again, you've
No.
got the time. You've got the time when you
Mhm.
have that, and you got the rookie contract to be able to help build that offensive line too. So I think maybe that opens up some avenues for them. Let's go to the former best offensive line.
Mhm.
Losing Jason Kelsey, obviously that was a big thing for the Philadelphia Eagles. Where do they sit now?
They're still top 5. I mean, they're well above average. Kelsey's a massive loss, but Beef Jurgens is in the hopper ready to
What a
take over.
name!
That's so
What
great.
a football name! Oh my
The
gosh!
tackles are great. Maybe the best O-line coach in the league, and they stress it. I mean, they put a lot
Yeah.
of resources in their O-line, so I'm sure it'll never be a weakness.
Yeah. Another offensive line that lost some key pieces at center and out at left tackle, including a future Hall of Famer at left tackle, was the Dallas Cowboys. Then they bring in Tyler Guyton. They bring in Cooper Beebe in this year's draft. You feel like that's going to be enough to kind of keep them at least average, or where do you have the Dallas Cowboys right now?
Yeah, I think they fall from above to average for those
Mm,
reasons. I mean,
yeah.
Guyton to me is a nice prospect, but might be a year away, and he's flopping sides. They probably have the best guard tandem in the league. The right
Yeah.
tackle Steele didn't play great last year either, and you have a new center. So at least they drafted 2 players I like, but it probably will take a little time in Dallas. So they're average for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Kind of the opposite of that Minnesota Vikings conversation, right? Better on
Yeah.
the interior than they are at tackle right now. And
Mhm.
so average makes a lot of sense for them. And then to wrap up the NFC East, we'll go with the New York Giants. I don't know. I mean, aside from Brian Daboll's questions to quarterbacks that they didn't draft, there's not really a lot of excitement going on around the Giants right now. But could the offensive line be something there at all?
I would say it was bottom 2 or 3 last year.
Oh,
I mean, like they
yeah,
really couldn't block a soul, and everyone
right.
to blame the quarterbacks and lack of receivers, etc. So they're still below average, but at least they went out and signed 2 starters, Runyon and
Sure.
Illuminor. They're not superstars, but they would have killed for those guys last year. So it's below
Yeah.
average, but at least trending the right way.
Yeah, maybe towards the top tier of the below average, or are they still kind of like
Hopefully.
middling in there?
I mean,
Hopefully.
Evan Neal's been killing them. I mean, they use a high pick on
Yeah,
a guy
that's
like
tough.
Evan Neal. Andrew Thomas is a star, though.
Oh yeah, I mean, first round offensive lineman not working out. Who
Ooh.
who knows anything about that?
Yeah, we
Ugh,
talked about that
yikes.
yesterday a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're gonna come back to it here in a little bit as we jump over to the NFC South. But we're gonna lead off first with the offensive line turnover in Tampa, who have mostly run it back, but have some big changes that they need to manage over the course of the past couple of years in the offensive line. What does that mean for them and Baker Mayfield? We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time, the absolute best place to go to pick up all of your last-minute tickets. So if you're like me and you like planning moments in advance, Game Time is awesome for you because they are obsessed with getting you the best ticket deals possible and giving you the most transparent experience possible as well. They've got all-in pricing. They've got zone deals, sponsored deals. They've even got the Game Time guarantee, which means if you go somewhere else and find a ticket in the same area, the same row, all of that, they will credit you 110% of the difference. How cool is that? And you even get to see views from your seats before you buy the tickets. You can take all the guesswork out of buying tickets by heading over to Game Time today. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL and get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Today, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, everybody, continuing on with this episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Matt Williamson breaking down offensive lines across the NFL, bringing all of that former NFL scoutness along the way. We appreciate you very much for being here for another episode. And of course, for checking out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream. You're going to be able to find it on YouTube, also on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app program to bring you all the biggest stories from around the world of sports with the local experts that know the teams the best. And speaking of knowing the teams the best, the NFC South is, of course, the division that I'm most familiar with, being someone that covers daily the New Orleans Saints. But I don't want to start the conversation here with the Saints. Matt, I want to start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They once had an offensive line that included some pretty good pieces and all these other things. One of the better centers in the league, although he did get a lot of criticism and everything. But now there's a lot of changeover on that offensive line. How do you see them falling in within our above average, below average kind of scale?
Yeah, they are an interesting one because they took a big risk a year ago moving Wirfs, who might have been the best right tackle in the league, to the left side, and he didn't skip a beat. He was phenomenal, and that allowed Getke to be the starting right tackle, which is his natural spot, and he was good. So you ended up solidifying two spots with that move. I think you solidified another, drafting Barton in the first round. I think he'll be a high-end center off the bat and could become one of the best centers in the league. Guards are fine, but they made a lot of moves, and I think it's starting to work out and pan out. So I'm going to go average for the Bucs.
Yeah, it feels like they're in a much better position than people might assume they're going to be with that turnover. And having Wirfs is just, I mean, gosh, man, any NFL franchise would kill for a guy like that.
One of the best.
Including one NFL franchise that I know would absolutely kill for a guy like Tristan Wirfs, the New Orleans Saints. They have 3 new starters expected on the offensive line, including Trevor Penning moving from one side to the other seems to be where they're going to go. We'll see if that's permanent. But where do you have the Saints ranking with all the question marks on their offensive line?
Yeah, and I urge everyone to go check out yesterday's show. We spent a lot more time on the entire team, but especially the O-line. They're definitely below average. I mean, I don't know that they're at the bottom. They're below average, a lot of questions. The Ram check factor really scares me, to be honest with you. And I meant to ask you something yesterday. I mean, it's a little off topic, but it's Saints related. Where are you on Alvin Kamara? Is he I thought he was still a great receiver. I thought he was a vastly diminished runner. I don't know where to take him in fantasy. Coach me up.
Yeah, it's tough. He might be, and now with the new offensive system coming in, fantasy wise, going to be even tougher because it's going to be running back by committee. So what does that committee actually look like? So that's going to be really tough. I mean, looking at the Gary Kubiak days and all those other things. But look, what I'll say about Alvin Kamara from a contract situation, I expect that the whole contract dispute thing will probably be. There's very few examples of this not finding a middle ground. So I'm not too worried about that. He wants guaranteed money in 2025. They're probably just giving guaranteed money in 2025. But when it comes down to how he's utilized, I think he's still going to be a weapon in the passing game, probably more so this year than in the previous years, and get back to running in space, getting him outside, running those outside zones, getting them to 18 and 19, like getting him to those gaps on the outside. I think that those are going to be the big things for him. So he might be a little bit of a wait and see kind of guy, somebody that's worth investing in, but I don't even know if I don't think he's a top running back in fantasy anymore at this point because there's just so much unknown in terms of what his usage is going to be.
Just hitting that golden age you don't like to see either. So that's need to get that. I meant to ask you that yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. All right, let's take a look at the Carolina Panthers. Lots of question marks around their quarterback. What about the guy standing in front of him?
They really need Icky, kind of like the Evan Neal conversation. You use a top 10
Yeah,
pick
right.
on a tackle. They really need to step up. But to their credit, I mean, when you have a short quarterback, your Saints know this better than anyone with Drew Brees, you invest in guards and centers. And I thought
Yep.
they overpaid for the pair of guards, but it at least gives Bryce Young a chance to succeed now. I mean, the pocket
Yep.
shouldn't be collapsing on him. So I think it goes from below average to average, which is a nice step, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Not bad at all, especially for a young quarterback like that.
Mhm.
Closest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So you want to make sure you're getting that pressure on the outside when it comes to these shorter quarterbacks so he can step up, have a clean pocket, all those things. I thought it was a good move by Carolina to invest there. And then we'll wrap up with the Atlanta Falcons when it comes to the NFC South. They added Kirk Cousins, but man, the offensive line's been good for a little while there.
Yeah, they might be second. They might be third. I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
clearly above average. They're strong across the board. Lindstrom's one of the best guards in the league. And my only concern is we know how run heavy they were with Arthur Smith. They're
Yep.
definitely more of a run heavy style of offensive line. Pass protection, it doesn't concern me, but I mean, I'm not sure that the scheme change is going to do them a lot of favors right off the bat,
Yeah.
with more
Yeah,
protection.
that's good. That's going to be a tough one, and that's more of a scheme situation too. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, when you have a Bijan Robinson, you got to find a way to use a Bijan Robinson.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we'll see how they end up adjusting to that. NFC West, I think the Los Angeles Rams are one of the most interesting offensive line conversations in 2024.
No question. I mean, we mentioned, kind of teased it, that some teams went out and spent money on guards, and the
Hmm.
Panthers were the obvious example. Well, Steve Avila was really good at guard for them as a rookie, and they're kicking
Yeah,
him into center. He's like a 325-pound center. I think he's the biggest
big dude.
starting center in the league. And then they went out and spent a lot of money on huge guards, So I bet from guard to guard, they're the biggest and one of the most expensive lines in the league. And when everyone thinks, everyone's passing nowadays, McVay's going to duo and ISO
Yep.
and, power up the middle, and we're just going to bully you. And I think that's pretty obvious. And so they're
Yeah.
above average now. They're above average.
Yeah. Old school run game, old school center. It makes sense. It
Oh,
makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah. If you're going to play too high
Let's
safety against you, we'll take 6 yards of carry.
Yeah, absolutely. One offensive line in the NFC West that I don't have as much confidence in are the Seattle Seahawks. Where do you stand there?
Yeah. They're definitely below. They concern me quite a bit. They drafted Haynes, I think, in the second or third round. He could be a plug and play starter. But other than Cross, I see a lot of concerns there. They're near the bottom of the
Yeah.
list for me. Yeah.
Yeah, Charles Cross out of Houston was like one of my favorite prospects in
Hmm.
this year's offensive tackle class in terms of the guys that maybe weren't the tier 1 guys, but I think his ceiling is really high. So that could go a long way. But man, just the Seattle Seahawks and offensive line problems, like it's name a better duo. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like we
it's
talk about it
problematic.
every year. One team that hasn't gotten a lot of coverage this offseason has been the Arizona Cardinals, but it seems
Yeah.
like they've been doing some quietly good work. I mean, their draft went well, things like that. They put in some work on the offensive line. How do you feel that impacted their offensive line outlook?
I think most people look at them like they're below average. There's not a lot of
Mhm.
household names there. I think they're up to average, and I respect their approach. They put a lot of resources into Paris Johnson a year ago, moving around in
Yeah.
the first round. He's going to be their left tackle. I don't love Williams, but he's a solid right tackle. And then, a lot of draft picks, a lot of names that they're kind of throwing at the fan to see who sticks. So they should have depth. They should have youth. So I really think it's trending the right direction. I think average is an achievement for them from where they were.
Yeah. Yeah. Another short quarterback situation in the NFL
True,
there, too.
true.
So investing on the interior could make a lot of sense as they continue to move forward. Let's wrap up the NFC West with BP's team. Let's take a look at the San Francisco 49ers, who I don't know. They're always so interesting the way that they address their offensive line.
They are. And I know we're not talking AFC East yet, but I think Miami, who comes from the San Francisco tree,
Right. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
view this the exact same way. Like, give me a star left tackle who I'm never going to help. And I think Trent Williams is the best offensive lineman in football still, even at his
Mhm.
age. And then the other
Pretty
four,
incredible.
we're going to scheme up with play action and not invest in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Miami's the same way with Armstead when he can stay healthy. And
Mhm.
Williams, you guys are our stars. The other four, we'll just piece together. So I think they're both below average despite having a great player.
Yeah, absolutely. I think San Francisco gets a little bit of advantage in that conversation because of how Brock Purdy operates outside of structure.
Sure.
Tua, not the same guy outside of structure. So it's really interesting to see them both have that
Yeah.
that type of approach. All right, let's wrap up real quick with the AFC West. The Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champions, looking for the three-peat. How's their offensive line?
Interior is great. some questions at tackle, a lot of penalties from that group, but there are some young, options at left tackle. So I'm going to still go above average. Their interior is really strong. Yeah.
Yeah. Las Vegas Raiders didn't invest too much when it came to quarterback this offseason, but did invest in their offensive line a little bit. How do you feel about them?
Low on the average list, somewhere between below and low. And I think the left side, from center to left tackle, should be fine. I think the right side's poor. So maybe I should be below average on them.
Yeah. Denver Broncos?
Quinn Minor's one of my favorite young budding stars.
So fun, man. So fun.
He's going to be a really, really good player. They have a lot invested in the line. I mean, Sean Payton, as you know, invests in linemen, and he did the same there. I'm going to go with average, though. I'm not sure they're getting their money out of McGlinchey and, some of those dudes.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if maybe being the focus on quarterback right now, they want to get that taken care of, and then they'll start to build out that offensive line. Another guy in that AFC West, to wrap us up here, that focuses a lot on the trenches, Harbaugh and those Los Angeles Chargers.
And I think that's going to be above average. I mean, they're one of the younger lines in the league. They kind of remind me of the Steelers. They've drafted a lot of high-end prospects here, so it's probably the best is ahead of them. I think they're probably slightly above average now with the capability of being elite, in a year or two. Yeah.
We might be talking about them as a top 5 group next year. I think there's a chance of that.
Those young tackles are really good, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the work that the Steelers did. Let's take a look at the Steelers next, because they were very, very busy over on their offensive line. Will it pay off in 2024? We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody, wrapping up today's episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. We're going to take a look at the NFC North, NFC South, AFC North, AFC South, AFC East to wrap us up. I want to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers here that did a ton of work on their offensive line. Have they done enough to set themselves up for success in 2024?
I think in a big way. I mean, they after drafting David DeCastro in the first round, they went like 10 years with basically ignoring linemen in the draft. That's changed dramatically. It's changed dramatically in the last 2 years. It's all potential, but the line was starting to come into shape last year. Good guards, the centers and tackles are very talented and young. So I think they're average. I'll bet everything I own they're above average by week 5 or 6, though.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, right. Sometimes it's not about where you start. It's how you develop over the course of time. That's really good. Let's take a look at the Cleveland Browns, because they're super interesting. My bold prediction this year, Matt, is that the Cleveland Browns fan base will be calling for Jameis Winston to be their starter by week 5.
I think so too. I think so too.
You see what I'm saying? Yep. So you're going to need the offensive line to protect for one of those two guys. Do they have it? Because this is a franchise that historically very, very good up front.
And they're still well above average. The biggest note for me, though, is Daddy Callahan went with son Callahan to Tennessee.
Yes.
So I am a huge believer in best O-line coach I can afford. I mean, if I was an owner and I hired a head coach, my next resource would be go get me the best offensive line coach you can. And that could hurt Cleveland a little bit, but they're still well above average.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Cincinnati Bengals season goes the way of Joe Burrow's health, which is really going to come down to that offensive line, keep him clean. Where do you look at them?
Average, but probably a little bit on the higher end of there. I mean, their tackles are gargantuan, and they drafted Mims. I think the interior's so-so. I also don't trust the tackles' health all that much, and I don't know how much we'll see from Mims, but they're finally putting resources in the line to protect Burrow. So I think it's average to above, right on that fringe.
Yeah. One of my first ever favorite offensive linemen, when I was old enough to say that I had a favorite offensive lineman, was Jonathan Ogden with the Baltimore Ravens. Long time success when it comes to offensive line for this team. Do they continue it in 2024?
It really worries me. It's very un-Ravens-like, because you always can trust their line. They always put resources into it. Stanley hasn't been close to the same since his ankle injury a couple of years ago. I think Linderbaum might be one of the best centers in the league before you know it. But the rest of that line to me is very questionable. So I would have said they were above average last year. Now I'm going to below average. I think they may have taken the biggest step back of any line in the league.
Yeah, it really feels that way. And look, when you have a quarterback like Lamar Jackson who can move around, maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable with all of it, but you want to keep him healthy too. You want to keep him on the field. Yeah. That's how you get that MVP level production from him. Speaking of protected for the quarterback, let's go to the AFC South here. CJ Stroud was a rookie sensation last year, looking for a second-year repeat or further second-year leap. Do they have the offensive line to continue to allow for that development?
Very much so. And it wasn't a strength last year because they had so many line combinations and so many injuries. But Tunsil's an elite player. Shaq Mason's a great guard. They have some youth there. I think it's a definitely top 10, well above average type of line.
Yeah, I'm so excited to watch the Houston Texans in 2024. They're America's new team. Screw the
I think
Dallas
you're
Cowboys.
right. Yeah.
They're America's new team. Everyone wants to see them win. Red, white, and blue, Texas. It all works. It's all there. Let's take a look at maybe their most bitter rivals. I would suppose being the Tennessee Titans. They've had a lot of turnover. You mentioned the Callahans heading over to Tennessee. How is the offensive line? They're looking after some recent investment.
I'm going to say they're striving to be average. I mean, I mentioned some of the really bad ones last year. Tennessee was at the bottom of the league last year too. But now you have Skoronski, you have Cushenberry at center, and you have Latham and a better O-line coach. I think 3/5 of it's fixed. They still probably need a couple other starters to complete it. So striving to be average.
Yeah. It feels like they're one of those teams that's getting the building blocks in place, but isn't quite there yet. But they're working, like they're getting there, and that's
active for
more than we can.
Yeah,
that's more than we can.
Yeah,
absolutely. Let's go Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, Trevor Lawrence gets the bag, but how's the offensive line ahead of him?
I would go slightly below. I don't think there's a lot of star power there. Guys like Schreff have been really good players, but are getting up in age. The tackles are fine, not great in my opinion. So I'm going to go slightly below average.
Yeah. Indianapolis Colts, are they okay?
I think they're near the top, to be honest with you now. Yeah. I mean, Nelson and Kelly have been great forever. Well coached, no real holes on the line. I would say they're probably a top 6 or 7 line in the league. So they're well above average.
That's an offensive line that has typically been very good. Now they have this superstar caliber potential quarterback. I think the Colts might be a team, at least on the offensive side, of the defense can continue to kind of like progress and all those other things. But goodness, man, it just feels like that is a team that could really surprise in 2024. So I'm excited to watch them.
Yeah, especially as you mentioned, if Richardson is what he can be, look out.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Need to stay on the field.
Absolutely. And that offensive line will play a big role.
Yeah,
in exactly that. AFC East, we kind of mentioned the Dolphins, so let's hit them real quick. You mentioned that they might already be below average, but it has more to do with just kind of the way that the philosophy around building that line.
Yeah, and a big problem I have with Miami overall, and it reflects in their line, is yes, you play in Miami and the heat is your friend, but you got to go to New England, New York, and Buffalo inevitably in your division. And as the season wears on and the weather comes into play, they lose in the trenches. And I think that's at a below average line. Instead of drafting yet another speed running back, draft a guard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. They're so predicated on the speed skill positions. Just invest a little bit on that line.
Yeah. Get some big people movers.
Yeah. For those speedy guys. The Dolphins do have to go to play in those inclement weather situations in New England, but the good news is that they have to play against New England. Their offensive line, where do you have them?
Near the bottom. I mean, I think that's going to be a big offseason project. Left tackle's a big concern. Wenahu at right tackle is a good player, but maybe he's a better guard. Strange hasn't really worked out as a first-round guard, so they're well below average to me.
He was such a surprise in that draft too. When Cole Strange went first round, it was strange. It was a strange pick.
It was bizarre and strange.
Let's look at the Jets. I know a lot of the focus is going to be on Aaron Rodgers returning, but obviously they want to keep him safe.
I think they're going to be well above average. I mean, Vera Tucker's back. He's a really good player. I really like Tippmann coming out of school. Their tackles are very fragile. They're old, but they did draft Fashanu in the first round too as some insurance. So much like the Jets, I think they're really talented, a little bit fragile, built for today. You know, obviously the age and injuries are a concern, but it could be one of the best lines in the league if they can stay healthy.
Yeah, Ole Fashanu, like one of the best pure tackles in this year's draft. I'm so excited to see him at the next level. And then we'll go next to wrap us up with the Buffalo Bills.
I'm going to go with average, but a little more above than below. They're starting to figure it out. I've been very critical of the Bills over the years. hey, you should go get Jerome Bettis or Mike Allstott. You play in Buffalo, guys. We don't need little scat backs. We don't need finesse linemen. So they're drafting guys like Torrance out of Florida that are 340 pounds and getting some big people on the line, starting to get more physical. So I like the direction their line is going.
Yeah. All right, there you go. That's all 32 NFL teams in 30 minutes. Everything you need to know. How's the offensive line doing? Right here, all in one. Fantastic job, Matt. That was awesome. We got more coming up for you tomorrow. It's going to be myself and another one of our local hosts taking a look at the NFL coaches around the NFL, as well as another one of your favorite teams across the NFL as well. So make sure you tune in to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show every single Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For Matt Williamson at Williamson NFL on your favorite social media, I'm Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola. We'll see you again here real soon on the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.